thank you, Julian, for kind introduction. I will repeat some of it and try to share some of the motivation for this kind of a talk and this kind of topic that I will be presenting you today. So as you see, I come from the field of media studies, but more concretely, thematically oriented field of research um, on discrimination, but discrimination in represented discrimination. What does it mean? I will just shortly give you some information about the project that I have been working on for 3 years, and where my awareness of this problem became very where I was able to formulate this problem, and awareness of this problem came to being. So I was working in a project called Decoding Anti-Semitism, where we were researching how the contemporary form of hate towards Jews is being expressed in social media. On the one hand, it was textual data. On the other hand, it was imagery and multimodal data. And our job there was basically to create a catalog of contemporary forms of anti-Semitic stereotypes, right? And to somehow try to categorize, try to give some structure to based on the historical knowledge to the contemporary hate. That was one thing, and the second rather applied idea of this project was to create an AI that would recognize by itself this hateful content. That would not only recognize it, but also classify it. Now, I really need to stress that, and I cannot stress that enough. We were running this project before ChatGPT and before all the generative AI and large language models hype. So we finished the project a few months before or after ChatGPT was released, right? So that is the reason why we were not using this technology for our project. So to say, we were before our time. However, what is important is first we were able to gather a lot of hateful material, which we were not really sure what to do with, because back then the NFDI was just starting, and there were, of course, some very general instructions on what to do with hateful material, how to store it, and or actually, let's put it differently. There were some general instructions what to do with research data, but there were not really, there were no instructions what to do with, if that material is hateful, right, and highly problematic, and basically hate speech pure. So that was, let's say, 2022, beginning of the 2023. And then we realized that we just cannot put all the data online, that we cannot let people access it. So that was one project that made this problem of having a lot of hateful material from your project and not being able to share it with anyone because of many ethical problems that you would be submitted to, and that I will be talking about today. So I will not go much deeper into it. After that, I had immediate second project. I was preparing a proposal for the German, for DFG, which you all know what it is. We wanted, as I was working at the Center for Study on Anti-Semitism, our idea was to digitalize our digitalize our archive. And in our archive, we have some 4 centuries of hateful material, of various propaganda material against Jews, so-called racial theories from the 19th century, a lot of party programs and manifestos dealing with, well, basically explaining why it is good to hate other nations, other race, and so on and so forth. You can imagine more or less 4 centuries of something that I would describe as social hate or social or institutionalized hate. Right? Now we wanted to digitalize it, and the problem was, again, we needed funding for that, and the best solution at the time, as we thought, was DFG. However, there was this clause. They demanded everything that we would digitalize to be made accessible, right? And so, of course, we know that making everything open access doesn't mean or yeah, the open access demands does not mean that it should be completely accessible. But in our conversation with Dave Gay, we understood that they understand this open access principle very strict, and that yes, that they do insist that we would make it completely accessible to anyone. And basically, they were expecting us to put it online. And there were some problems for that. One problem was we did not have infrastructure to put it online. I mean, we could maybe put all the files that we would digitalize for everyone to download, and that was not an option. And the other problem was we didn't want to do that, right? And the reason why we didn't want to do that is because we would just fuel this anti-Semitic sentiment that is already given in the society and that already exists. We would fuel it with the historical material. So that is the reason why this was not an option, and why the program for digitalization was not an option for us, right? And during this period, it became clear for us that we are dealing with a very with a conceptual problem and with an ethical problem. So this talk today deals exactly with these specific problems, and I will lead you through that. I will not talk about our institution. I will talk about some solutions that are given in the world, and I will try to explain what a possible solution might look like, right? There are no solutions here. This is basically just reflection, right? So let's dive into it. Right. So obvious question. Why should we talk about ethics in research data infrastructures today? This is, of course, in introductory problem to what I'm dealing with that makes a bridge to what we are all interested in. So, well, one of the reasons is because all the data, research data archives and repositories that we used to have offline are today digital born. That is one problem. And the other problem that is more relevant for my talk today is because of this need to digitalize historical archives, right? So basically, when we talk about research data infrastructure, we slowly include more and more historical archives into our discussion. The second problem that is relevant for this discussion, extremely relevant for this discussion, is the AI, right? And various AI tools that that of course it makes complete sense to use them, right? Because of vast data that we are confronted with, right? If we perform any kind of research, we really need these tools, so we would make sense of all the data. One person could never be able to deal with it, right? However, obviously, these tools are entering some sensitive domains that were in the past not accessible, or that were made inaccessible to people, right? In German, there is this expression Giftkammer when we talk, and this expression Giftkammer was very relevant and is very relevant for institutions such as the Center for Studies of Anti-Semitism, um, because basically all the primary sources there belong to it, right? So you can imagine what would happen if you would grant access to anyone to these toxic chambers, to translate it into English, or what would happen if you would use this, or if you would let AI be trained on these data, right? And then there is this dilemma that I already mentioned. On the one hand side, we have a very relevant and very important principle of open science and open data. I mean, we all agree how important that is for our science and for the future, and for the knowledge that we need to share, and methodology that we need to share, and to reproduce the results, and to prove the studies of our colleagues from all over the world, right? So I mean, there is no way around it. Open science should be and is something that is globally relevant, and should remain globally relevant for everyone. However, when it comes to harmful content, which is case in point, right? There are a lot of problems with that. So basically, if we would make, if we would be very strict about it, and we basically the foundations that support this research are strict about it, then we would need to make harmful content also available to everyone, which is then problematic. Then instead of researching it, you are to some extent also disseminating it, or giving it second life in the society, and that is a problem, right? That is a problem also because it is something illegal, right? According to German law, you should not make any harmful content or hate speech accessible online, especially if you are an institution. Of course, I mean, you have two laws that are banging on each other, but we will come to that again, right? And then because of the AI tools, right, we can come to conclusion, right, that research data infrastructures are not, or will not be, neutral environment that is there to store and give access to the content, but something different, right? Now, it is very hard to say what does it mean that infrastructure is not neutral, and it's very hard to explain what is the opposite of neutral. But let's put it like this: if it is then possible to use tools, and especially when we talk about harmful content, to use these tools to download or to train your AIs on harmful content, then we are talking about something very, very, very problematic. And all of these problems we are confronted with in this wave, in this trend, which is again normal, and we all have to greet it because it is good for science and for the research. This trend of mass digitalization, right? So let's go a little bit further with this problem. When it comes to when it comes to research data structures, and especially those that are relevant for us with historical material, those that I mentioned here, and that here in NFDI we have at least four of, right? In the section of humanities and social sciences, we're talking about those frameworks or those infrastructures for storing, for sharing, and for analyzing research data. And what is analysis of research data then? Not research as such, right? And especially, and this is especially relevant if we consider the EOSC programs for virtual research environment, right? Now, having that in mind, that that there are tools, how to say it, that there are tool marketplaces, right, given by supported by EOSC, that there are environments where you can actually do your research online. We understand slowly that this infrastructure as such is not neutral, right? It is not only for storing; it is also for working with this data, and that I mean, if we imagine a bad actor, that could lead to some problematic consequences, right? So even though RDIs are there to secure principles, to secure data, and to make it accessible, right? Fair principles. Like I will not waste time explaining that, right? When it comes to problematic, to hateful content, there are many risks that we need to be aware of, and that where the ethical approach is more than welcome, right? Because legally it is not so easy to solve this problem, right? So now let's be even more concrete when it comes to the problem that I'm talking about. So we have lots of archives, yeah, all the GLAM section basically, archives, libraries, museums that have their old collection, that have their own libraries, right? That have their own, as I mentioned, toxic chambers, but not only toxic chambers, right? So these specific specialized libraries in for example in medical museums or natural museums, or all these institutions that are dealing with ethnography, anthropology, medicine, and also art. Now, why is it problematic? Well, and I'm pretty sure that you ran into some of my colleagues that were actually complaining about this problem. Well, this is problematic because in all the racial theory and hate towards other religions, right? Well, they come from the history. So basically, our colleagues from one of the museum libraries in Berlin, they had this very problem. They realized that if they would, after they already did the digitalization of their library, they had a whole section of ethnographic pieces, ethnographic journals from the 19th century. They realized that if they would publish that and make it accessible to everyone, they would be spreading racism, right, and the racial hate. And now you can only imagine what would then happen if someone mass downloads all of these works and uses it for well, tries to starts disseminating it around, or uses it to develop their own arguments that are against a specific ethnic or religious group in our multicultural society, right? So this is a really this is a problem that many of our institutions, GLAM institutions, are confronted with, right? Now, there are in Europe, or we in Germany, we are not the only one who have the problem. There are many institutions that are trying to deal with it, to somehow solve it, right? What to do when you have colonial material that is intrinsically racist, right? Well, because the other nations, colonized nations, are represented in a specific meaning way. Racist content as such, as I mentioned, we're talking about scientific. We're talking about scientific journals that are basically spreading these racist ideas, right? Or in Germany we have a special problem with anti-Semitic content, right? What do we do with it? How to deal with it? It bears legal burden. Legal burden is very clearly it is just illegal to put that kind of content online. Our colleague Kai Naumann wrote a very good piece some year or 2 years ago where he goes into detail on talking about article a law article that is articles in the law that are dealing with consequences of what would happen to the institution if it would disseminate, or if it would be seen as disseminating racial and religious hate, right? And this kind of content, even though it comes from the past, and even though it is part of any historical library, this kind of material could be seen and should be seen as highly problematic and even as illegal, right? Or at least quoting it and disseminating it should be seen as illegal, right? So that is one problem. But even if we say based on our common sense, yeah, there is no one who would sue the Federal Archive, for example, for disseminating that kind of content, right? That would be crazy. No one would come to that idea. There is this symbolic burden, and now there was a problem with the Federal Archive, Bundesarchiv, right? Because following the principle of open data, which they had to do, right? They are obliged by law. For a very long time, you were able to access all the Nazi propaganda movies on their website, right? And that was a problem, right? That was a big problem. That they solved it, right? They made access management more complicated, so now it is not so easy to do it. But for several years we had that problem, right? Now you can also access it, but you need to have special access rights, right? However, this is just one of the institutions, and there are thousands of one institution that is very rich, right? That can allow itself to create such an infrastructure and to adjust it, right? But there are many archives and many historical how to say, libraries that are obliged to make make these contents, and they don't have the means to create proper infrastructure, right? Or at least not yet. However, there are also other institutions, and I will touch upon them. I believe these examples will help us understand it better. There are other institutions that had the same problem. And some of them, or those that I will be talking about today, are not from Europe, right? Or at least those that I will be showing some examples from that I will go deeper into, right? And when it comes to the AI that we need to use for all of these research data infrastructure, the problem is, well, what does it mean to use AI, right? You could argue that even OCR and HCR processes and metadata generation and the indexing of the content is done by, can be done by using large language models, right? Or sorry, at least metadata generation and indexing, right? And that OCR processes are also driven through by machine learning, right? However, the problem that we are talking about, that we want to focus on, is the backside of the artificial intelligence, that is basically training it on this toxic data without safeguards, right? And then if you want to build a tool like we wanted in our project, you need to train it on toxic data. You need to train it on the hate speech and other hateful material, right? In order to use it for recognition, right? So basically, if you do that, you're doing something that is almost illegal, and you have to do it for, in order to get new tools, right? You are never certain who will have access to this data, and or I mean, if you are certain who will have access to this data, then the data is not in the open access, right? And there is always this fear that someone will train AI in order to generate toxic and hateful content in large quantities. We already have cases of that, right? So there is this dual use dilemma when it comes to the AI. On the one hand side, you have this infrastructure where you could also think about creation of new tools, right? And then on the other side, you have this idea that these data would be used as for generating new similar content, which is then of course very, very problematic, right? And it goes, I believe that more and more when we talk about research data infrastructures, RDIs, we will very soon be at a position where we will not be able to talk about any processes that do not involve AI. For now, it is possible, of course, no question about it. But in the recent future, that will be less and less the case, right? I will skip this because it is only about what should we know about archives and how they what is their role in the general discourses. I believe I can skip this and I can come back to that a bit later. The only thing that is important is their role for the knowledge, and it's using the AI, they become much more accessible, right? Right. And here we come to the core of the whole project, of the whole talk today, right? Where we have this demand for freedom of access that is based in open access and open science principles, and that is conditioned for most of the EU digitalization grants, right? And on the other hand, well, of course, legal problems, at least in Germany and in the EU, where on the one hand side you have demand for freedom of speech and expression, and therefore you cannot restrict access to historical data or historical archives. And on the other side, that is relevant, a bit more relevant for us, you have right to dignity on the personal and collective level, right? And if you would publish all this data or disseminate all this data, that would be harmful for for descendants of these vulnerable communities that were targeted in the past, right? So basically, the reason why we have these legal restrictions is in order to first to protect, to stop the spread of hate that is normal on the one hand side, and on the other hand side to mitigate the risk of reinforcing hate or trauma to the descendants of these communities, right? And also, so it is not only about spreading hate; it is also about the memory of these people. You don't want them to relive the trauma, and you don't want to dehumanize the victims again by publishing all the scenes of terror from the past, right? Now, how to deal with it, right? That is the question. And how do institutions like those that I mentioned previously deal with it? Well, one of the ways how to deal with it is to represent or show the original content in the context, right? So we all know in Germany, and I believe that most of us here are coming from German institutions. We all know about this special edition of Hitler's book Mein Kampf. It was very problematic to publish it, but finally, historical institutes, if I'm not mistaken, published it in a commented version, right? So you don't censor it. You have everything there, but you have also comments explaining why it is problematic, right? And why it does not really make sense, right? And that is one way that some of the institutions are working, are doing, right? The other obvious alternative to the contextualized representation of harmful content is just giving access to it. And I will show you another example that does exactly that, right? Now, the second field or second field of problems that we have here when it comes to ethical issues is the description of harmful content, right? So very often, at least when it comes to historical archives dealing with anti-Semitism, you use these problematic terms from the past. And that makes sense because only if you use them, you will be able to recognize it and to find the very content that you are searching for. However, when you talk about this Ausmerz and terminology like that, the moment you say it, it triggers the whole field of hateful content, right? And it is considered, well, maybe not Ausmerz, but many other terms are considered to be very problematic for that very reason, right? So there is a large body of work that deals with it, how to make metadata descriptions, right, not hateful and still useful for research, right? And the same thing goes when we talk about colonialism or any other hate ideology, right? How to remove these hateful categories from the past, from the description of the data, right? So these are some really relevant problems in this field. So a good example, a relatively good example, how to show the hateful material from the past or racist material from the past is given by Jim Crow Museum in the United States. Well, they basically have similar problem like we do. They have all of these objects from like we have with in the Center for Studies on Anti-Semitism. That is what I wanted to say. They have all this material that was spread that belonged to everyday material in the past, and today it is considered to be hateful, right, for obvious reasons. Now, how to deal with it, how to represent it, and how to explain why it is problematic. So this is what they did, right? They put it in the context. So they even put a very explicit material also in the context and in the text. So even though there is obvious difference between the visual or multimodal element and the textual element, which explains all the wrong things within the multimodal content, it still makes sense to do it because it is not so explicit and it cannot be used then for spreading hate in the future, right? Or at least that is assumption that they're dealing with. Now there are some other repositories that deal with historical and extremist literature, and one of them is a repository of extremist aligned documents from King's College, London, right? Now, they also have a very, very, very comprehensive archive of hateful literature and primary sources. And here you can see basically all the categories that they are offering in their archive, and it is all online, right? All of it is online, and if you are registered there, as I am, you then have full access to one of the largest online repositories of hateful material, right? And you can do your research. You cannot. They don't have a virtual research environment themselves. So basically, you can access so you can search for the object that you need, and then you can find it, and then you have to download it, and then you have it basically. So it would be possible that it is not safe, what I wanted to say. It would be possible for me, if I would be a bad agent, to basically download a lot of this material and then to use it to train my own AI or to spread it. And yeah, I cannot prove that someone is doing that, but at least that could be possible. So their toxic chamber is a bit is not so safe. And then you have something in between. So basically, this is an American website. They have a very extensive archive of German war propaganda, especially during the Nazi time, and anti-Semitic propaganda as well, and also the material from GDR, from communist Germany. So it is a scientific institution, but all of this is ran by one scholar, right? Who published a few books on these topics, and he decided to share his material, his data. Right? So on the one hand side, it makes sense. It is in the spirit of open science and open data initiatives and principles. But on the other hand, when you see what he's sharing, you kind of have this bitter taste in your mouth, right? Finally, this is this is a EU initiative where obviously it's called So Big Data, where they share corpora of Twitter and social media material, most of which is full of hateful speech, right? So it is similar to DP-Rex ran by Gazes. However, it deals with European material, not only with German material. The problem, it is semi protected. Only some of the corpora are protected, right? So obviously, as I already said, why it is problematic? Problematic. It is problematic because of hate. Social hate is full of patterns. It is very easy to train AI to reproduce it, right? And you don't want basically to repeat the historical forms of discrimination within the digital realm, which is, I mean, it is already repeated, but we still want think that we can prevent it in the future, and it would make sense to introduce some ways to prevent it. For that, we should think about ethics not so much as a set of principles, but as a strategy, right? And Luciano Floridi, who is the patriarch of ethical issues in when it comes to AI and internet, he formulated some 4 steps when we talk about ethical strategy as a prevention strategy, right? And there it is. He says we need to interrogate the goals. What do we want when we digitalize our material? What are the risks that can happen? Um, and then it comes then it gets really interesting. We should engage the stakeholders first, identify them, and then engage them. So invite them to help us in the process of digitalization and the building of the proper research data infrastructure. And then together with these various stakeholders, uh, design the possible or think or reflect on possible mitigation pathways, how to avoid those risks. And then, and this is my humble contribution to this discussion, what we need there is something that is called transepistemic design, which helps us. I mean, let's put it like this: if we have various stakeholders that come from completely different backgrounds, they will not be able to understand each other, right? So the gain in knowledge during their exchange will remain basically zero. So they actually need to spend some time together, right? And that is this spending time together, understanding the backgrounds of each other, and understanding how each of these groups can actually contribute to the problem in question, is what we call transepistemic, right? So you have to create an environment where they will understand and where they will be able to start understanding each other's perspectives, right? For example, me as a media studies scholar who wants to research the historical hateful narratives, representative of the Jewish community, for example, or any other vulnerable community, with an IT developer and a legal studies scholar, we should all sit together, right, and understand from our with our backgrounds what the problems are that we are dealing with, and trying to understand how to overcome them, right? So, because when we talk about this interdisciplinary work, it is at the same time cross-sectoral work. You maybe have scientists from all the sides, but it doesn't have these people don't have to be scientists, right? They can be also um, people from with completely different backgrounds, right? Or they don't have to be scientists in this specific topic that we are working on, that we are dealing with, right? That's why it is rather it makes more sense to talk about it as a cross-sectoral work, right? And then for that you need the framework for this kind of work. You need specific processes that are called co-creation process, and that make circular and iterative learning, right? Iterative learning, and here it gets a little bit complicated because this relies on this idea of peer learning, where you talk about grown up people, right? And they have to engage with each other in order to work on a common project, and this is always a very very challenging thing. So that's why I'm introducing here into this ethical strategy elements of the organizational education, right? Where you change the way the participants, the stakeholders are learning, and the way they are contributing. So basically, when we talk, I'm coming back and I'm finishing my lecture. We have so to say a triple mandate when we talk about research data infrastructures, right? So we have these two elements that we always talk about when we talk about research data infrastructures of fair and care. Whereas care, we should rethink the care principles and think about including the vulnerable groups, at least when we talk about the historical archives and the hateful content that is being stored there, right? Including the representatives of vulnerable groups to contribute to creation of these research data infrastructures, right? And to try help them formulate their ideas, right? Help them formulate their ideas of their own rights and responsibilities, right? Which is not always so easy. So we need to broaden the care element a bit. And then we need to concentrate on this ethical element that I was talking about today, which is thinking about the open access, right? But in a way that it is context aware, right? So you should not be able to publish freely anti-Semitic propaganda in Germany, right, or anywhere, or racist journals from the 19th century, right? That should not be possible. So you need to be context aware of it. You need the design, you need the setting where stakeholders would be able to discuss about it and to discuss about the ways how this should be released into the public, right? And of course, when it comes to technical elements, you need the complex access management, but that is less of an ethical problem, more of a technical one, right? So based on all of this, if I should formulate some recommendations, and I would allow myself to formulate them, then I would think about ethics, sports embedded very early in the process of building the research data infrastructures, or when it comes to introduction of new tools within the infrastructure, right? I would always think about the human in the loop especially when it comes to access management and filtering who has access to it. I would allow these ethic boards to rethink and renegotiate open access conditions. And maybe I would suggest also alignment of practices across the consortia, having people discuss these ethical issues not only within the smaller infrastructures, but also across various consortia, at least when we talk about NFDI. And these are, again, some very general insights about archives, which maybe in order to discuss a little bit, we can skip for now. So thank you for your attention, and I'm free for any question you may have.